Tyler, 42, business executive, divorced, no children. I used to make a joke when we were still together and tell people that when I first saw Nancy my heart was pounding so hard that I couldn't catch my breath. It was true, she was a nurse who worked for the firm where I'm employed, and I was in her office on a treadmill, having my respiratory system checked. That's what all the heart pounding and heavy breathing was about. I had been sent in by my superior because I gained so much weight and also because I'd been having some pains in my chest. Actually, I was in terrible shape. My wife had left me a year and a half before for another man, and while I know that starts a lot of guys running to the bars at night, I just stayed home and watched TV and ate. I had always liked to eat. My wife and I had played a lot of tennis, and I guess that had taken care of the calories when we were together, but with her gone, playing tennis depressed me. Hell, everything depressed me. That day in Nancy's office I learned I'd gained 65 pounds in 18 months. I'd never even bothered to weigh myself, though I'd gone through several sizes of clothes. I just didn't care. Nancy was all business at first, telling me how serious the weight gain was and what I'd have to do to get rid of it. But I was feeling like an old man and I really didn't want to make the effort to change. I guess I just felt sorry for myself. Even my ex, when she'd see me, would scold me and say, "How can you let yourself go like this?" I half hoped she'd come back to save me, but she didn't. Nancy asked me if there was any precipitating event tied in with my weight gain. When I told her about the divorce, she stopped being quite so professional and patted my hand sympathetically. I remember I felt a little thrill when she did that, and it was special because I hadn't felt much of anything for anybody for a very long time. She advised a diet and gave me lots of pamphlets and charts and told me to come back once every 2 weeks so she could see how I was doing. I couldn't wait to get back there. The 2 weeks went by and I hadn't followed the diet or lost any weight, but I sure had gained her sympathy. She and I spent my entire second appointment talking about how the divorce had affected me. She listened and then urged me to do all the things everybody tells you to do: go to classes, join a health club, take a trip with a group, develop new interests. I agreed to everything, did nothing, and waited 2 more weeks to see her again. It was at this checkup that I asked her out. I knew I was fat and miserable looking, and I really don't know where I got the nerve, but I did, and she accepted. When I picked her up Saturday night, she had more pamphlets, along with journal articles on diet, the heart, exercise, and grieving. I hadn't had this much attention in a long time. We started going out and pretty soon we were getting serious about each other. I thought Nancy was going to make all the pain go away for me. She sure tried, I'll say that. I even moved out of my apartment and into hers. She made a big deal of cooking low cholesterol meals and watching everything I ate. She even made me lunches to take to work. Although I wasn't eating anything close to what I had been consuming all those nights alone in front of the TV, I wasn't losing, either. I just stayed the same, no fatter, no thinner. I tell you, Nancy was working a lot harder than I was to get me to lose that weight. We both sort of acted like it was her project, her responsibility to make me better. Actually, I think I have a metabolism that requires strenuous exercise in order for me to burn up calories efficiently, and I wasn't getting much exercise at all. Nancy played golf and I would play with her a bit, but it just wasn't my game. After we'd been together about 8 months, I made a business trip back to Evanston, my hometown. Sure enough, after being there 2 days I ran into a couple of friends from high school. I hadn't wanted to see anyone looking the way I did, but these guys were old friends and we had a lot to talk about. They were surprised to hear about my divorce. My wife was a hometown girl, too. Anyway, they talked me into playing a set of tennis. They Both played, and they knew it was my game from high school. I didn't think I could last through a single game and told them so, but they insisted. It felt so good to be playing again. Even though the extra pounds really slowed me down, and I lost every game I played. I told them I'd be back next year to whip them both. When I got home, Nancy told me she'd gone to this great seminar on nutrition and she wanted me to try out all this new stuff she'd learned. I told her no, that I was going to do it my own way. For a while now, Nancy and I had never fought. Sure, she fussed over me a lot and was constantly on me to take better care of myself, but it wasn't until I started playing tennis again that she and I began to squabble. I played at noon, so it didn't take away from the time we spent together, but she and I were never the same. Nancy is an attractive gal, about 8 years younger than I am, and once I began to shape up I thought we'd get along better than ever because she'd be proud of me. God knows, I felt better about myself, but it sure didn't work that way. She complained that I just wasn't the same anymore and finally asked me to move out. By that time I weighed only 7 pounds more than I had before the divorce. It was really hard for me to leave her. I'd hoped we would eventually get married, but once I was thinner, she was right, it just wasn't the same between us anymore. Tyler's attraction to Nancy. Tyler was a man with rather pronounced dependency needs, which were exaggerated by the crisis of the divorce. His almost deliberate deterioration, calculated to arouse his wife's pity and solicitude, failed with her but nevertheless attracted a woman who loved too much, who made another's well-being the core of her purpose in life. His helplessness and pain and her eagerness to help were the basis for their mutual attraction. Tyler was still smarting from his wife's rejection, as well as deeply grieving for the loss of her and the end of their marriage. In this unhappy state common to all those struggling through the throes of separation, he was attracted not so much to Nancy as a person as to her role of nurse and healer, and to the surcease from suffering that she seemed to offer. Much in the same way he had used great quantities of food to fill his emptiness and smother his loss, he now used Nancy's hovering solicitude to provide a sense of emotional security and bolster his damaged self-worth. But Tyler's need for Nancy's total attention was temporary, a passing phase in his healing process. As time worked its magic, replacing self-obsession and self-pity with healthier self-assertion, Nancy's overprotection, once comforting, now became cloying. Unlike Tyler's temporarily exaggerated dependency, her need to be needed was not a passing phase, but rather a core trait in her personality and almost her soul framework for relating to another person. She was nurse, both at work and at home. Though Tyler would still be a fairly dependent partner even after recovery from the shock of divorce, the depth of his need to be taken care of could not match the depth of her need to manage and control another's life. His health, for which she had seemed to work tirelessly, was actually the death knell for their relationship. Bart, 36, former executive, alcoholic since the age of 14. Sober 2 years. I'd been divorced and out doing the singles scene for about a year when I met Rita. She was this long-legged, dark-eyed, hippie-looking girl, and at first we got stoned a lot together. I had lots of money still, and we really had a great time for a while. But you know, Rita was never really a hippie. She was too responsible to let go much. She could smoke a little dope with me, but somehow her proper Bostonian background would never totally disappear. Even her apartment was neat all the time. I had this sense of being safe with her, as if she wouldn't let me fall too far. The first night we went out we had a great dinner and then came back to her apartment. I got really drunk, and I guess I passed out. Anyway, I woke up on her couch all covered up with this nice, soft quilt, and my head was on a pillow that was scented, and I just felt as if I'd come home, a safe harbor. You know, Rita knew all about taking care of alcoholics. Her father, a banker, had died from his disease. Anyway, I moved in with her a few weeks after that, and came on like the hotshot wheeler dealer for the next couple of years, for as long as I could get away with it, until I lost everything. She had quit doing any dope at all after about the first 6 months we were together. I guess she figured she'd better keep on top of things because I was so out of it. In the middle of all this we got married. Then I really got scared. Now I had another responsibility, and I hadn't done so well with responsibility. Besides, right about the time we got married, I was losing everything financially. I just couldn't hold it together anymore in the shape I was in. Drinking all day long. Rita didn't know it was that bad, because I'd tell her I was going to a business meeting in the morning and instead I'd drive out in my Mercedes and park by the beach and drink. Finally, when the bottom really fell out of the business and I owed everybody in town, I didn't know what to do. I took off on a long trip, intending to kill myself in my car and make it look like an accident. But she came after me, found me in this sleazy hotel, and took me home. All the money was gone, but she still got me into an alcoholism treatment hospital. It's funny, but I wasn't grateful. I was angry, confused, very scared, and totally turned off to her sexually for about the first year of sobriety. I still don't know if we'll make it, but it's getting a little better as time goes by. Bart's attraction to Rita. When on their first date Bart got drunk and passed out, Rita, by making sure that he didn't suffer, seemed to promise him a respite from his headlong rush toward self-destruction. For a while it looked as though she might be able to protect him from the ravages of his own addiction, to subtly and sweetly save him. This seemingly protective attitude actually served to lengthen the time that her partner could practice his addiction and not feel the consequences. By shielding and comforting him, she helped him stay sick longer. An addict who is practicing his disease isn't looking for someone to help him get well, he's looking for someone with whom he can stay sick safely. Rita was perfect for a while, until Bart got so sick even she couldn't undo what he was doing to himself. When she tracked him down and entered him into a hospital program for alcoholics, Bart began to give up alcohol and recover. Rita, however, had come between him and his drug. She was no longer performing her usual role of comforting him and making everything all right, and he resented her for that apparent betrayal and also for appearing to be so strong when he felt so weak and helpless. No matter how badly we're botching the job, each of us needs to feel that we are in charge of our own life. When someone helps us, we often resent that person's implied power and superiority. Moreover, a man often needs to feel stronger than his female partner in order to feel sexually attracted to her. In this case, the help Rita gave Bart by getting him into a hospital only made it clear how very sick he was, and her deeply caring gesture thus undermined, at least for a while, his sexual attraction to her. Besides this emotional aspect, there may also be an important physiological factor operating here that should be taken into consideration. When a man has been using alcohol and other drugs the way Bart did, and then stops, it sometimes takes a year or more for his body chemistry to right itself and for him to respond sexually in a normal fashion, without the presence of a drug in his system. During this period of physical adjustment, the couple may have considerable difficulty understanding and accepting his lack of interest and/or inability to perform sexually. The opposite can also occur. An unusually strong sex drive may develop in the newly clean and sober addict, perhaps due to hormonal disequilibrium. Or, again, the reason may be more psychological. As one young man, abstinent from alcohol and other drugs for a few weeks, put it, "Sex is the only way I can get high now." Sex may thus be substituted for the use of a drug to relieve the anxiety that is typical in early sobriety. Recovery from addiction and co-addiction is an extremely complex and delicate process for a couple. Bart and Rita might survive that transition, even though they originally came together because their diseases of alcoholism and co-alcoholism called to each other. But to make it as a couple in the absence of active addiction, they must walk separate paths for a while, each focusing on his or her own recovery. They must each look within and embrace the self they tried so hard, through loving each other, dancing with each other. To avoid. Greg, 38, clean and sober for 14 years in narcotics. Anonymous, now married with 2 children, and working as a counselor to young drug abusers. We met in the park one day. She was reading an underground newspaper. And I was just sort of spacing out. It was a Saturday in summer, around noon, really hot and quiet. I was 22 and had dropped out of college my first year, but I kept making noises that I was going to go back. That was so my parents would keep on sending me money. They couldn't let go of their dream that I would finish school and enter a profession, so they bailed me out for a long time. Alana was pretty fat, about 40 or 50 pounds overweight, which meant she wasn't a threat to me. Because she wasn't perfect, if she rejected me it wouldn't count. I started a conversation with her about what she was reading. And it was easy, right from the beginning. She laughed a lot, which made me feel as if I was this charming, entertaining guy. She told me about Mississippi and Alabama, and marching with Martin Luther King, and what it had been like, working with all these people who were trying to make a difference. I'd never been committed to anything except having a good time. Getting high and getting by was my motto, and I was much better at getting high than at getting by. Alana was so intense. She said she loved being back in California, but that sometimes she felt she didn't have the right to be so comfortable when other people in this country were suffering. We sat in the park together for 2 or 3 hours that day, just kind of drifting along, telling each other more and more about who we were. After a while we went back to the house I shared to get stoned, but when we got there she was hungry. She started eating and cleaning the kitchen, while I was getting loaded in the living room. There was music on and I remember she came out with this jar of peanut butter, these crackers, and a knife, and sat down real close to me. We just laughed and laughed. I think in that moment we both let ourselves be seen as addicts, more clearly than we ever did after that day. There were no excuses then, just the behaviors. And we were both doing exactly what we wanted to do, plus we'd found someone who wouldn't give us a hard time about it. Without saying a word we knew it was going to work for us to be together. We had a lot of good times after that, but I don't think there was ever another time when it was all so easy, when both of us were so free of defenses. Addicts are pretty defensive people. I remember we used to fight a lot about whether I could make love to her without being stoned. She was sure she was repulsive because she was fat. When I got loaded before we made love, she thought I had to, in order to stand it. Actually, I had to be stoned in order to make love to anybody. We both had pretty low self-esteem. It was easy for me to hide behind her addiction because her weight showed that there was a problem. My lack of motivation and the fact that my life was going nowhere were less obvious than those 50 pounds she was carrying around. So there we'd be, fighting over whether I could really love her even though she was heavy. She'd get me to say that it was who she was inside that counted, not how she looked, and then there would be peace for a while. She said she ate because she was so unhappy. I said I got loaded because I couldn't make her happy. In this really sick way we were perfect foils for each other. We each had an excuse for what we were doing. Most of the time we pretended there were no real problems, though. After all, lots of people are fat, and lots of people get loaded. So we'd just ignore the whole thing. Then I got arrested for possession of dangerous drugs. I spent 10 days in jail and my parents got me a hotshot attorney who got me into counseling as an alternative to more jail time. Alana moved out while I was locked up for those 10 days. I was so angry. I felt she'd abandoned me. Actually, we were fighting more and more. When I look back now, I realize I was becoming pretty hard to live with. The paranoia that develops in people who do drugs for any length of time had been really beginning to affect me. Also, I was either loaded or wanting to get loaded almost all of the time. Alana had been taking all of it personally, thinking that if she were only different I would want to be more present with her, not stoned every minute. She thought I was avoiding her. Hell, I was avoiding myself. Anyway, she disappeared for about 10 months, on another march, I think. The counselor I saw insisted that I go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings. Since it was either that or jail, I went. I saw some people there I had known from the street, and after a while it began to dawn on me that I just might have a problem with drugs. These people were getting on with life and I was still getting stoned every day, all day. So I stopped bullshitting my way through meetings and I asked one guy the first thought a lot of if he'd help me. He became my sponsor in NA, and I'd call him twice a day, morning and night. It meant changing everything I did. Friends, parties, everything, but I did it. The counseling helped, too, because that counselor knew everything I was going to go through before I did, and he'd warn me. Anyway, it worked, and I was able to stay away from drugs and alcohol. Alana came back when I'd been clean and sober in NA for 4 months. And right away it was the same old thing. We had this game we played together. The counselor called it colluding. It was our way of using each other to feel good or bad about ourselves and, of course, to practice our addictions. I knew I'd get loaded if I got into all that behavior with her. Now we're not even friends anymore. It just didn't work if we couldn't be sick together. Greg's attraction to Alana. Greg and Alana shared a powerful bond right from the beginning. They each had an addiction that was ruling their lives, and from the first day they met they focused on each other's addiction to diminish, in comparison, the importance and power of their own. Then, throughout their relationship, they subtly and not so subtly exchanged permission with each other to stay sick, even while protesting each other's condition. This is an extremely common pattern with addictive couples, whether they are addicted to the same substance or to different ones. They use each other's behavior and problems to avoid facing the seriousness of their own deterioration, and the greater the deterioration, the more this partner is needed to provide a distraction, to be even sicker, even more obsessed, even less in control. Along with this dynamic, Alana appeared to Greg as compassionate, willing to suffer for something she believed in. This always has a magnetic allure for an addictive person, because a willingness to suffer is a prerequisite for a relationship with an addict. It guarantees that the addict won't be abandoned when things inevitably start to go bad. After long months of bitter quarreling, it was still only when Greg was gone, doing time in jail, that Alana found the strength to leave him, even temporarily. She inevitably returned, ready to begin again where they had left off, as two practicing addicts. Greg and Alana knew only how to be sick together. With Alana's own addiction to food still out of control, she could feel strong and healthy only if Greg were constantly loaded, just as he could feel his drug use was coolly self-controlled compared to her binges with food and extreme overweight. Greg's recovery made her lack of recovery too obvious for them to be comfortable together any longer. She would have needed to sabotage his sobriety in order for them to return to a workable status quo. Eric, 42, divorced and remarried. I'd been divorced a year and a half when I met Sue, an instructor at the community college where I coach football. Had twisted my arm to come to his housewarming, so there I was, on Sunday afternoon, sitting alone in the master bedroom watching a Rams 49ers game while everyone else was out in the living room enjoying the party. Sue came in to put down her coat and we said hello. She left and then half an hour later came back to see if I was still there. She teased me some about holing up all alone in the back room with the TV, and during the commercial, We chatted a bit. Well, she left again and came back with a plate of everything good that was being served out where the party was going on. I looked at her then really for the first time and noticed how pretty she was. When the game was over I joined the party but she had gone. I found out that she was a part-time instructor for the English department, so on Monday I stopped in at her office and asked her to let me pay her back for the lunch she'd brought me. She said sure, if we could go somewhere with no TV, and we both laughed. But it wasn't really a joke. It would not be an overstatement to say that when I met Sue, sports were my whole life. That's the thing about sports. If you want to, you can pay total attention to them and not have any time left over for anything else. I ran every day. I trained for marathons. I coached my players and traveled with them to games. I followed sports on TV. I worked out. But I was also lonely, and Sue was very appealing. Right from the beginning she paid a lot of attention to me when I wanted it, and yet didn't interfere with what I wanted or needed to do. She had a son, Tim, who was 6, and I liked him okay, too. Her ex lived out of state and rarely saw the boy, so it was easy for him and me to be friends. I could tell Tim wanted to be around a man. Sue and I got married after we'd known each other a year, but pretty soon things started going wrong between us. She complained that I never paid attention to her or Tim, that I was always gone and that when I was home all I cared about was watching sports on TV. I complained that all she did was nag me and that she had known what I was like when she met me. If she didn't like it, what was she doing here? I was mad at Sue a lot of the time, but somehow I couldn't be mad at Tim, too, and I knew that the way she and I were fighting was hurting him. Though I never would admit it then, Sue was right. I was avoiding her and Tim. Sports gave me something to do, something to talk about and think about that was safe and comfortable. I'd grown up in a family where sports was the only topic you could discuss with my father, the only way you could get his attention. It was pretty much all I knew about being a man. Well, Sue and I were just about ready to split up. We were fighting so much. The more she'd pressure me, the more I'd tune her out and escape into my running or the ball games or whatever. Then one Sunday afternoon the Miami Dolphins and the Oakland Raiders were in a playoff and the phone rang. Sue was out with Tim, and I remember how annoyed I felt at the interruption, at having to get up and leave the TV. The call was from my brother, telling me that my father had had a heart attack and that he was dead. I went to the funeral without Sue. We were fighting so much I wanted to go alone, and I'm glad I did. Going back there changed my whole life. Here I was, at my father's funeral, never having been able to talk to him and on the brink of my second divorce because I didn't know how to relate to my wife either. I felt like I was losing so much. And I couldn't understand why it was all happening to me. I was a nice guy. I worked hard, I never hurt anybody. I felt sorry for myself and totally alone. I rode back from the funeral with my youngest brother. He couldn't quit crying. He kept talking about how it was too late now, that he'd never be close to our father. Then, back at the house, everybody was talking about Dad. You know how you do after a funeral, and people kept making these little jokes about Dad and sports, how much he loved them, how he was always watching them. My brother-in-law, trying to be funny, said, "You know, this is the first time I've been in this house when the TV wasn't on and he wasn't watching a game." I looked at my brother, and he started to cry again, not sadly but bitterly. All of a sudden I saw what my father had done all his life and what I was doing, too. Just like him, I wouldn't let anybody be close to me, no. Me, talk to me. The TV was my armor. I followed my brother outside and we took a drive together down to the lake. We sat there for a long time. As I listened to him talk about how long he'd been waiting for Dad to notice him, I started really seeing myself for the first time, realizing how much I'd become like my father. I thought about my stepson, Tim, always waiting like a sad little puppy for some of my time and attention, and how I had kept myself too busy for him or his mom. On the plane ride home I kept thinking about what I wanted people to say about me when I died, and that helped me see what I had to do. Back home with Sue I talked honestly, maybe for the first time in my whole life. We cried together and called Tim in to be with us, and he cried, too. After that, everything was wonderful for a while. We did things together. Bike rides and picnics with Tim. We went out and we had friends in. It was hard for me to back off the whole sports thing, but I had to quit almost cold turkey for a while to get everything in perspective. I really wanted to be close to the people I loved, not to die and leave people feeling the way my father had. But it turned out to be harder for Sue than for me. After a couple of months had gone by, she told me that she was going to take a part-time job on weekends. I couldn't believe it. That was our time to spend together. Now, everything was becoming reversed. She was running away from me. We both agreed to get some help. In counseling, Sue admitted that all our togetherness had been driving her crazy, that she felt like she didn't know how to do it, how to be with me. We both talked about how hard it was to really be with another person. Even though she'd nagged me about my old behavior, she now got uncomfortable when I paid attention to her. She wasn't used to it. If anything, her family had been worse than mine in the attention-affection department. Her father, a ship's captain, was always gone, and her mother liked it that way. Sue had grown up lonely, always wanting to be close to someone, but like me she didn't know how. We stayed in counseling for a while, and at the therapist's suggestion we joined the Stepfamily Association. As Tim and I got closer, Sue had trouble letting me discipline him. She felt left out and like she was losing control of him, but I knew I had to set my own limits with Tim if he and I were really going to have a relationship. Being in that association helped me more than anything else. They had group meetings for families like ours. Listening to other men struggling with their feelings was great for me. It helped me keep talking about mine to Sue. We're still talking and we're still together, learning how to be close and to trust each other. Neither of us is as good at it as we'd like to be, but we keep practicing. It's a brand new game for both of us. Eric's attraction to Sue. Eric, lonely in his self-imposed isolation, yearned to be loved and cared for without having to risk closeness. When Sue approached him on the day they met, tacitly signaling her acceptance of his chief means of avoidance, his obsession with sports, Eric wondered if he hadn't actually found his ideal woman, one who would care for him and yet leave him alone. Though Sue subtly complained about his inattention by pointedly suggesting that their first date be away from a TV, he still correctly assumed she had a high tolerance for distance. Otherwise, she would have avoided him in the first place. Actually, Eric's blatant lack of social skills and his inability to relate emotionally were attractive elements to Sue. His clumsiness both endeared him to her and assured her that he wouldn't be able to reach out to other people, including other women, and that was important. Sue, like so many women who loved too much, deeply feared abandonment. Better to be with someone who didn't quite meet her needs, but whom she wouldn't lose than with someone more loving and more lovable, who might leave her for someone else. Also, Eric's social isolation provided her with a job to do, to bridge the chasm that stretched between him and other people. She could interpret him and his idiosyncrasies to the rest of the world, attributing to shyness rather than indifference his retreat from social contact. Simply put, he needed her. Sue, on the other hand, was letting herself in for a situation that would replicate all the worst aspects of her childhood years: the loneliness, the hopeful waiting for love and attention, the deep disappointment, and finally the angry despair. As she tried to force Eric to change, her behavior only confirmed his fears about relationships and caused him to retreat further. But Eric did change dramatically, due to a series of profoundly moving events in his life. He became willing to face his dragon, his fear of closeness, in order to avoid becoming another version of his cold, unapproachable father. That he so strongly identified with lonely little Tim was a major factor in his commitment to change. But this change in him forced a change in each member of the family. Sue, catapulted from being ignored and avoided to being pursued and courted, was forced to face her own discomfort with actually receiving the loving attention she craved. It would have been easy for Sue and Eric to stop at this point, with the tables turned and the pursuer now pursued, the avoider now avoided. They could have simply exchanged roles, kept their proscribed distances, and maintained their comfort level. But Sue and Eric each had the courage to look deeper, and then to try, with the help of therapy and the support of an understanding and empathetic group, to risk really becoming closer as a couple and, with Tim, as a family. There is no way to overstate how important initial encounters are for us all. As a therapist, the impact a new client has on me during our first meeting provides some of the most important information I will ever receive about that person, through what is said and what is left unsaid, and by everything else that is revealed by physical appearance, posture, grooming, facial expression, mannerisms and gestures, tone of voice, eye contact or lack of it, attitude, and style. I receive an abundance of information about how the client operates in the world, particularly under stress. It all adds up to getting a strong, undeniably subjective impression, providing me with an intuitive sense of what it is going to be like to work with this person in the therapeutic relationship. While, as a therapist, I very consciously try to assess my new clients' approach to life, a very similar, though less deliberately conscious, process ensues when any two people meet. Each tries to answer some questions about the other, based on the wealth of information automatically telegraphed during those first few moments together. The questions being silently asked are usually simple: are you someone with whom I have anything in common? Can I benefit in any way from cultivating a friendship with you? Are you fun to be with? But often other questions are asked, depending on who these two people are, and what they want. For every woman who loves too much, stronger questions reside beneath the obvious, rational, practical ones, questions we strive all the harder to answer because they come from so deep inside us. Do you need me? The woman who loves too much secretly asks. Will you take care of me and solve my problems? Is the silent query behind the spoken words of the man who would choose her to be his partner.